Memories as Weapons, a chronological reconstruction. Imagine being completely unable to trust your own mind. You're trapped in this fractured timeline where cause and bloody effect are literally completely disconnected from one another. So how do you solve a murder if you can't make new memories? Well, this is the brutal, everyday reality for a guy named Leonard Shelby. He used to be an insurance claims investigator, but his entire existence was completely derailed after a violent home invasion. Leonard survived the attack on his wife, but he was left with a catastrophic brain injury. And now he's driven by a singular, all-consuming thirst for vengeance against the attacker, a man he only knows as John G. The underlying memory condition. See, Leonard suffers from anterograde memory loss. It's the inability to form new memories after an injury, leaving him in what he describes as a constant state of waking, where the present just constantly fades. To survive day to day, when his mind literally cannot hold on to the present, he relies on a desperate, incredibly rigid system. We're talking endless handwritten notes, annotated Polaroids, and even permanent tattoos inked right onto his own body. It's wild. He actually compares his tattooed system to a man he once investigated named Sammy Jenkins. Sammy had the exact same condition, but zero system, zero drive, and that lack of routine completely destroyed his life. So, to keep himself focused, Leonard constantly reminds himself to remember Sammy Jenkins. To really understand this tragic story, we actually have to look at the true chronological sequence of events, the very timeline that Leonard himself cannot perceive. It starts with a hit on a man named Jimmy Grants, followed by a devastating revelation just hours later. Then, over the next few days, Leonard forges a new target, meets a woman named Natalie, and finally executes his ultimate vengeance. Let's trace it. The Jimmy Grants hit. Okay, so guided by a man who calls himself Teddy, Leonard arrives at this isolated, abandoned building outside of town. Teddy has completely convinced Leonard that a local drug dealer named Jimmy Grants is actually the John G. who assaulted his wife. When Jimmy shows up with a trunk full of cash, Leonard ambushes him. He forces him to strip, strangles him, fully believing he has finally avenged his wife. But as Jimmy Grants is lying there dying on the basement floor, he utters a single fatal word. Sammy. Now, Sammy Jenkins is a super obscure detail from Leonard's past. Literally only someone who knew Leonard well, someone who had spoken to him about his condition, would ever know that name. So in this terrifying flash of absolute clarity, Leonard realizes Jimmy Grants actually knew him. He was just set up to murder a total stranger. Teddy's devastating revelation. Moments later, Teddy arrives at the building. He watches Leonard dragging the body and decides, you know what, it's time to lay all the cards on the table. Leonard's entire truth, his whole reason for living, is built on the belief that Sammy Jenkins accidentally let his wife die, and that his own wife's attacker, the real John G., is still out there. But Teddy drops an absolute bomb here. He says Sammy Jenkins didn't even have a wife. It was Leonard's wife who was the diabetic. She actually survived the home invasion, but she couldn't cope with Leonard's brain damage. She tested him by having him administer her insulin over and over and over until she fell into a fatal coma. Leonard has literally been projecting his own immense, unbearable guilt onto this fabricated story about Sammy. And it gets worse. Teddy reveals that he already helped Leonard track down and kill the real John G. over a year ago. Teddy is just relentlessly exposing this cruel manipulation. He looks at Leonard and says, "You don't want the truth. You make up your own truth." See, Teddy reveals his real name is John Edward Gamel, and he's actually an undercover cop. He's been using Leonard to murder drug dealers like Jimmy for cash. Why? Because he knows Leonard's condition makes him the absolute perfect hitman. The second the job is done, Leonard will immediately forget the murder, forget the money, and forget the victim. Forging a new target. So picture this. Leonard is standing over a dead body, listening to Teddy completely dismantle his entire reality. It's a massive internal crisis. He absolutely refuses to accept a truth that makes him responsible for his wife's death. I mean, it would completely destroy his only reason to live, right? So to protect his sanity, Leonard systematically weaponizes his own memory loss to erase the truth. While Teddy is outside, Leonard takes action. Step 1, he chucks Jimmy's keys deep into the brush so he'll forget the victim's car. Step 2, he writes down Teddy's license plate, SG137IU, leaving a breadcrumb for a new target. And step 3, the kicker, he writes "Don't believe his lies" right on the Polaroid he has of Teddy. In this incredibly chilling moment, Leonard consciously asks himself, do I lie to myself to be happy? He looks over at Teddy and decides, in your case, Teddy, yes, I will. He intentionally chooses to frame Teddy, whose real name, remember, is John Gamel, as his new John G. Leonard chucks Teddy's keys into the weeds, steals the dead man's Jaguar, and drives away. He has just purposefully set off a tragic, inevitable chain of events. And the aftermath. Now driving Jimmy's car and wearing Jimmy's clothes, Leonard is flying completely blind. He follows a coaster he finds in the jacket pocket to a place called Ferdy's Bar, where he runs into Jimmy's grieving girlfriend Natalie. And Natalie? She is sharp. She quickly spots Leonard's condition and immediately realizes he's an easy mark. She actually tests his memory by spitting into a beer and serving it to him. Gross, right? But when he drinks it without blinking, she confirms he is completely vulnerable. She obviously hides Jimmy's real fate from him. Instead, after a brutal encounter, she manipulates Leonard into believing a thug named Dodd beat her up. She literally weaponizes Leonard, sending him after Dodd for her own protection. The wild irony here? She is completely oblivious that the amnesia she's manipulating is the very same guy who just strangled her boyfriend in an abandoned building days earlier. And to keep him on a leash, she agrees to run a trace on that license plate Leonard wrote down. The final vengeance. So to repay Leonard for his violent help with Dodd, Natalie hands him an envelope. Inside are the DMV records for the license plate he recorded. Leonard opens it up, and the trace result reads, John Edward Gamble. Leonard looks down at the John G tattooed on his body and instantly matches the name John Gamble to John G. He flips over that old Polaroid of Teddy and sees his own handwriting staring back at him. Don't believe his lies. He is the one. Kill him. Just like that, his artificially manufactured puzzle snaps to a close. Following the deadly breadcrumbs he purposefully left for himself days prior, Leonard lures Teddy to the exact same abandoned building where Jimmy Grants was murdered. Teddy is frantic. He's protesting, telling Leonard he doesn't know who he is or what he's doing. But Leonard just points his gun and says, "Beg my wife's forgiveness before I blow your brains out," and he pulls the trigger. He is completely, totally unaware that he orchestrated this entire execution himself, just to silence the horrible truth Teddy told him days ago. Driving away from the murder scene, his slate wiped completely clean, and his own guilt safely hidden away again, Leonard closes his eyes. He asks, do we all need mirrors to remind ourselves who we are? Because as Leonard proves, in the end, we are really no different. We all lie to ourselves to be happy. So what lies are you telling yourself right now?